On this day, the 22nd of January 1905, the Bloody Sunday Massacre took place in St Petersburg, Russia. It's estimated that somewhere between 143 and 234 were killed during that day, with up to 800 injured. Others, including Soviet sources, say hundreds, many more hundreds than just 234 were killed, and others up to 1,000. But whatever happened that day, it broke the bond between the Tsar and the people for many. In December of 1904, a strike had started in St. Petersburg as a result of some men being fired from an ironworks. By January, this strike had gone viral, as we say nowadays, and many hundreds of thousands had struck. By January 21st, St. Petersburg went without electricity, it had no newspapers, and many public areas had been closed. An Orthodox priest who was an evangelical sort of figure in Orthodox Russia decided to prepare a petition where he would very respectfully ask the Tsar to help the working people of St. Petersburg. In his letter he explained the problems that his parishioners, his followers, were going through. He called for improved working conditions, fairer wages, an 8-hour workday, an end to the Russo-Japanese War, and universal suffrage. The last one might have been a little bit problematic, but however you would see this was not a revolutionary act. Gapon and his followers were very orthodox, very patriotic, and very loyal. They saw the Tsar as their little father, and believed that if he knew their problems, he would make it right. Now, the news of this march and this petition, this planned march and the petition, came to the ears of the Tsar and his circle. And instead of making this a PR coup, which he could have, he decided to leave St. Petersburg for Tsarskoye Selo, I think it's pronounced, on the day before. Now, if I was the Tsar, or if I was an advisor to the Tsar, I would have said, stay here, let them come, because they're harmless, go out, meet them, and take the petition, and give them all nice words, and maybe even do a few things like an 8-hour work day, and try to improve working conditions, and okay, the Russo-Japanese War and the universal suffrage, you can put the back burner, but, you know, a few things, a few crumbs here and there, would have been very popular. But instead he left. Apparently someone even in his own family advised that he should stay. So, troops were assembled in St. Petersburg. Again, I'm not really sure why. Somewhere between 3,000 and 50,000 people apparently were part of this petition march. If it was 3,000, then that's nothing to be terrified of. 10,000 Russian imperial troops were put on standby in the heart of St. Petersburg. So, in the morning, around dawn, at 6 points outside the city, the petitioners started to gather and march toward the Winter Palace. They never actually got to the Winter Palace. They were stopped on the various bridges going over the canals and rivers leading into the city centre. And it was there that the violence began. They were told to go back, and they didn't. And so the Cossacks and the various other soldiers started attacking them with bayonets. About 10 or 11 in the morning, they started shooting. Now, these were in small these were small incidents around the city, at various bridges and various squares. So much so that around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on a Sunday, as you do, families would go for walks, and they would promenade down the various prospects in St. Petersburg. And there were people walking down the Nevsky Prospect, which is one of the main roads. I think it goes up to the Winter Palace itself, the square outside it. And people were promenading with their families, not understanding what was going on. During the day, because of this, people promenading around, some people would get caught up in the charges of the soldiers towards the petitioners, and people just out for a walk with their families would end up getting shot or crushed. Basically, it was a disaster. It was a PR disaster on top of everything else. The Tsar apparently thought it was a very sad day. And many of the petitioners, many of the traditional Orthodox, loyal petitioners, and people like that throughout Russia, would say we no longer have a Tsar. This was Bloody Sunday. The consequences of the Bloody Sunday massacre were long-lasting and wide-ranging. It led directly to the 1905 revolution, which ended up with the Tsar having to create a Duma and surrender power. Something he didn't like and something he would try to go back on as the years went by. The 1917 revolution, when it did happen, the Tsar didn't have as many defenders as he would have had this Sunday never happened. If he had been in the Winter Palace, if he had met the leaders, or even got one of his secretaries or ministers to go out and meet the leaders of this petition, if he had brought Father Gambon in and talked to him and assured him about various things, these 3,000 or 50,000 or however many there were people would have probably gone home happy. And they would have considered the Tsar, continued to consider him as their little father who was looking after them. Instead, he broke that bond of trust between himself and probably millions of people. And so when it finally came to the day when he was, forced to abdicate, there weren't that many people willing to fight for him. And it would eventually lead to his own and his family's death years later. A misstep, a tragedy, and it would lead to disaster. Not just for him, but for all of Russia. If you like these videos, come back for more tomorrow. Like, comment and subscribe.